There's a thought that often keeps me awake at night. Maybe you too. What will people say about us at our funeral? What labels will they give us? Because I've been given many labels in my life, but my favourite one, you are your father's daughter. Contest chair and friends, let me tell you why. Growing up in the 70s in rural Ireland, we didn't have much, but we were happy. My dad was a simple man from a simple town with a simple job he loved. He was a postman. You know what that makes me? The postman's daughter. Now, my dad wasn't what you'd call an ordinary postman because he did a lot more than deliver post. In his van, he always had a spare tank of gas, a bag of potatoes for Mrs. Riley up the end of the lane, and he always had time for that cup of tea and a chat with lonely Mr. Smith. As a child, I used to love watching him pack the van, double-checking all the labels. And my favourite part, if there were stamps that hadn't been franked, he would steam them off so we could reuse them. Yeah, we were that poor. Fast forward 2005. I stood broken-hearted at my dad's funeral, listening to people talk of what a kind and gentle person he was. Mrs. Riley talked about the highlight of her day was when Dad called in. Mr. Smith, he talked about what a great listener Dad was. And Mrs. O'Neill actually told me the story of one day she was sick. He took the baby and fed her from. They were all giving my dad labels. I wish he had known about himself. You see, my dad was also an alcoholic, and even though he gave up drink when I was a child, he couldn't see past that label. And it broke my heart that he died boxed in that label. Losing my dad got me thinking of where I had been limited by labels. Labels like, oh, she's ADHD, she's got dyslexia. Well, I decided I didn't want to feel as my dad had, and I didn't want it for anyone else either. So, I did what any normal person would do. I became a psychotherapist. These days, you should see my office. Streams of troubled teens come in, covered in labels. ADHD, anxiety, anorexia, depression, dyslexia, dyscalculia. Do you know what I say to them? Let's leave your labels at the door. It's you I want to get to know here. One young man comes to mind, a tortured, troubled teen who couldn't see past his labels. In fact, the first time he came to see me, he had black, greasy hair covering his face. He had his hoodie pulled up and bent forward. In our work together, we started to peel back some of his labels. And, you know, it was so encouraging to see him take a few risks and step past the limits of his labels. When he came in for our final session, you should have seen him. Hair gelled back, no hoodie up, drenched in links. So I said to him, "What do you think helped most?" And he said, "You listened. You didn't label me." Wow. The power of listening without labeling. The power of seeing the person, not the label. The power of leaving the labels at the door. Recently, I was out in my local pub having my usual 7-Up. And I started talking to this total stranger, who it turned out was from my hometown, Virginia. And I started to talk about Virginia and different things about it. I asked her, did she know my dad? Well, her face lit up. And she said, "Sean Hopkins. Oh, I remember him so well. He was a great person. He used to bring our post, the eggs, the shopping. And do you know, he used to hide our love letters and keep them for us so that our parents wouldn't see them." How I wish my dad had been able to wear those labels and to leave his limiting labels at the door. Is there a label that's limiting you? Could you leave it at the door? How might that make you feel to step out, see you, see yourself the way others see you, the way they're going to talk about you at your funeral? These days, when someone says to me, "Eileen, you are your father's daughter," well, that's one label I am so proud to wear. The labels that limit me, I leave them at the door. And fellow Toastmasters, I hope you can leave yours there too. Contest chair.